I'll ask our speakers, please, to come up. I want to take questions, continue to take questions from the audience for Matt and Scott and Susan. So we'll take a few questions, and then during the reception, there will be time for your own individual discussions with everybody. So, yeah, James.
I've got a really specific but kind of clunky question for Matt about Copilot and Microsoft. So we're a Microsoft shop here, and we very deliberately didn't switch on. So there's 10 versions of Copilot, but we didn't switch on Copilot for 365 because of the way it leverages the knowledge graph.
Yeah.
Basically, any emails you've written, any documents you've shared with colleagues
are exposed.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how, for your organization, you were able to sort of get past that sort of precipice where there's lots of stuff within the organization that definitely shouldn't be accessed and surfaced, because there might be confidential documents, stuff that you shouldn't own, things that are untrue, all that good stuff.
So first of all, I'm a humble marketer and not a CIO type of person too. So, but I've been around this enough where I know what you're talking about, which is great. I think that's awesome for, as I think about this. I think to your point, Scott, about the slow roll and take it slow, maybe not so much on the ethical, but just to do it right. Maybe those are the same thing. I don't know. But it's been my experience that this is why, remember I was telling you about the 11-month lag on the functionality from when ChatGPT had it? I think it's because Microsoft is making sure that the graph is dialed in, that it's working. And I think that is what's taking so long. I don't know that our organization has considered some of the tripping points of this Copilot platform, which on any given day is different. I swear. I think it's just a different beast, and they talk about it differently on different days. And so I don't know if I answered the question, but I think it's all about taking the amount of time that's needed. But I don't think that we as an organization, and this is not a question that I've asked, our CIO, that whole group, is how information is accessed based, I take it for granted that the graph is working, right? That I can access things in SharePoint today and other people cannot, and vice versa. And that those are the same fundamentals that are behind how Copilot is accessing things. And I think that's what's going on.
Thank you.
Got a question for you, Matt. You mentioned that pitch document that you brought to your leadership team. How did that conversation go, and what were the reactions from them, and what kind of questions were they asking you? That's
great. If you notice, I did not actually pitch it yet, so I've not given it to them. And the timing of this discussion for AI adoption and the fact I had that thing written in last January. And then I pushed the brakes on it because of the proof of concept for Copilot. Because I wanted to do all sorts of things. I wanted to use all the models, and then we released Copilot, and then they asked me to be on the proof of concept. So it was kind of like I felt terrible to say, well, I want to do all these other things too. It didn't really make sense. It didn't jive. So I haven't had the conversation yet. And remember, the CMO left. He was going to be my executive sponsor, and he was ready to do it. And we were getting closer, and then he's gone. So it just threw a wrench into the gears. The good news is that the momentum continues. It's just, who else are we going to find in the organization to be that executive sponsor? The way I think it's going to go is, I think that document, I spent a lot of time on it, and I think it's extremely efficient information, and it makes sense. It's nearly unarguable from all the momentum that AI is in the marketplace, and being a SaaS business and technology. I think it's going to go well. I don't even know if it's going to be a discussion because everything's laid out, including deliverables. Like, tell us what you're going to actually do as opposed to meet every month, you know? We're going to deliver on this, this, and this, and do these things. And I think that's a real important part of it.
Scott.
I've got a question for you. So are you seeing AI as I don't want to say excuse, but as a launching point for a lot of ethical discussions happening within organizations? Because I don't remember, like in the early days of the web or mobile or social, that conversation coming up, and it's a very relevant, important topic. So I'm curious if you're seeing something similar to like what we're seeing with discovery, where we have to do discovery because we don't have any behavioral data to go back and say this is how people are using it. It's kind of similar with ethics as a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. When a year ago, April, when ChatGPT hit the scene, I mean, that's all you saw in Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, ethics. How are we going to use this? Elon Musk comes out and says it's an existential threat to humanity, and suddenly everybody's thinking Terminator. But once the serious conversation started, it really was, how are we going to use this? And a lot of the conversations, the fear that you see around AI and anxiety around it really is, how's it going to be used? You know, I'm not picking on anybody, but, you know, China has started surveilling and tracking its citizens and giving them a political score. That's scary stuff. You know, a lot of conversations in Brussels right now about, do you let an AI system autonomously launch a missile? Again, that's a huge ethical issue. I don't know what's the right answer, but yeah, a lot of fear is driving the questions of what's the right way to use this and what sort of governance can we put around it to protect ourselves.
Do you think, I'm gonna ask a question. Do you think what I've seen in the last year too, companies are waiting for someone else to do it and get the blueprint, and then we'll do that? Do you think that's happening? Because everyone's like, this could be for Susan, right? Like, we're maybe there, we're kind of there, some are doing it, I don't know, maybe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, the risk with that is like, so I used to have a for-profit client, it was for-profit university. And they were fairly successful. Everything we did, our compliance would say, that's cool, do you want to go in front of the Department of Education and defend it? And that would be it isn't just you figure it out, it's you're going to be the example. And that's actually very much the conversations, which is why when we're talking with our regulated clients, it's please bring compliance to the first meeting. We won't work with you if you're not bringing compliance in less than a third through, because we know, first of all, we're going to have a hostile witness when compliance finds out. And number two, we're going to also probably have to start all over again with our timelines, because there's going to be a lot of things that come through. And that's not to say that compliance is the big bad bully. It's just they're wired different and they look at things differently. And there are things that they find out to ask those harder questions, which is why cross-functional teams are so important. But it is that thing, like I was just sharing, copyright has been my big ballywick lately. Protecting content. I've been talking to a lot of lawyers and content leaders about it, just because I'm hearing a lot of, we're not going to have copyright direction for probably 5 years. I'm being optimistic, because it's going to take a Supreme Court ruling, and we all know how the court systems work. There's about 35 landmark cases against OpenAI alone. And then there's a bunch of other ones that are also out there towards Anthropic and others. One has already been ruled on dismissed without prejudice because the suing party could not show harm. That's already raising eyebrows. That's going to go through appeals. So that one's starting on appeals. We know that. What do we do with these things? How do we think about what needs to be protected and what doesn't? I was talking to a lawyer who represents actors, and his response was, well, OpenAI has licensing, and maybe that's probably the safe way. My spidey sense is not so much, because some of our clients, quote unquote, are the little guys. They're not the billion-dollar enterprises. They don't have the slush fund of lawyers that can protect them, or they don't have the ability to pull back. So one of the things we are figuring out right now, quite honestly, is what is reasonable and helpful information. I wish I could tell you right now. I can't. Just because still talking to different lawyers and getting different perspectives from what does that future look like in 5 years or in 3 months if we find out certain things have to come back. So that's been a whole other part of the ethical conversation. I don't know how much of that has come your way, Scott. I would love to hear your thoughts too.
Well, the truth is that the companies who are buying rather than build are typically more open about talking about all the issues around adoption, from governance to operationalization to audit. I'm personally concerned that developing an AI system from scratch is super expensive. There's very few companies that can afford to do it. And the ones that are doing it, most of them aren't talking about it very much, so we don't know what they're doing. And I think that I have a real ethical concern, a social concern, that is effectively consolidating power and benefits from AI development in the hands of very few small companies that are answerable typically to a board and not anybody else. But there's such broad social impacts and questions. We need to find the right amount of governance to put around it, to put some transparency on what's being developed out there.
Yeah, and from the brand standpoint, from an organization that builds software for customers, in this case, banks, right? Not a lot of regulation going on there. I think most, if not all, companies like ours, we're using those underlying models, right? And we're just creating things from those. So those questions are relevant. What about that underlying thing? And how is it going to perform and then how's it going to perform today? And how's it going to perform a month from now, 6 months from now? Because we've got 3-year contracts with these companies to do these things. And I haven't had a discussion yet that has any answers.
Pioneers, we're pioneers.
We're pioneers.
Did you, Fernando,
Yes.
I jumped in front of you, so
That's all right. I just want to ask Matt, why do you use like Chat and Copilot so much compared to like Claude or like Gemini? Is there like is it because it's better for data or like fan favorite?
No, I honestly use the other foundation models as well too. I personally, so just to put it in perspective, in January of this year, we had our AI policy come out. And it said, you can use Copilot and that's it. And by the way, we're not paying for it. So you can use the free version, but it is secure because it's behind the firewall and all that other stuff, the knowledge graph and all that. We're going to get to providing it, and we will. In 2025, there's budget for everyone. And because no one knows who's putting what information into these things. We've all heard those stories, right? And I personally am like, no, if I have any IP, it's going into Copilot. But ChatGPT, personally, I've got the $20 a month. Just to Paul Raitzer reference again, at that Austin, Texas, September 2023 keynote, he said, get this software or buy this subscription. It is the best deal in the history of software.
For sure.
And I was like,
For sure.
guaranteed,
For sure.
no question. It's totally true. So I've been using it ever since then. And I just haven't found the need to buy the other foundation model. So I'll go to them and I'll use whatever monthly thing I've got and I'll back off.
We're always still so far ahead of everybody else, and then everyone catches up, and then they do something and everyone else catches up, so.
Just adjacent to that, like the risk of, don't underestimate the risk to your organization doing that. There needs to be governance, there need to be guardrails around use these third-party products. I mean, once you feed some data in there, it's in the wild, man. It's never coming back. So if it's confidential or proprietary or intellectual property and you're gonna go up to Gamma and say, hey, here's my 2025 strategy document, turn it into a PowerPoint presentation for me. that info is out and you are never getting it back. It's like taking a glass of water, me giving you a glass of water, saying, go dump it in Lake Michigan, and then asking you 2 weeks later, go get me that same glass of water out of there. It's not
And just to be
gonna
clear, any IP, like I was saying,
Yes.
any IP I was
Yes.
using
Yes.
was going into our protected
Yes.
models.
Yes, it's on record.
Yes.
It's on record. This is not being taped.
I'm not bad.
So there was, the gentleman right in front of you, Hope, had a question first, I'm sorry.
No, mine's a follow-up, but that's okay.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thanks. So it's a follow-up to his question with the different platforms. I love playing around because they all give such different answers. And you were talking about the custom GPTs, which I've just heard about today. Can you create it in one and transport it into another?
No.
So there's a couple things to say about that. With ChatGPT, you need the paid version, the paid account to create. Then you can share to people who have accounts but don't have paid accounts. They don't need the paid account. With Copilot and the new functionality I was telling you about, that's virtually identical to that because it uses all the same foundation model. You can't share it outside of the organization, or you can't even share it. You can share it in like Teams and that sort of thing, and you can actually paste it into emails and things like that. Can't do that today. They haven't released that functionality. Again, we'll get there. It's the slow motion of Microsoft's because they can.
You could create like Google or old Gemini has gems, which is their idea, Claude is pages. So they have things, but you can't, you could take that prompt and put it in. But
There is a tool called Lindy.ai that does allow
yeah.
you to start playing around with different prompts to different models. It does act a little more agentically depending on how you're asking, because it will start to figure out A plus B plus C, but we actually, as a 2-person boutique full-time, and then we have the rest of our bench, we have quite a few of Lindy assistants where we have them where they, like using the drift report, we're able to create a personas of what are the personas that come from this research that we should be thinking about, or our audiences, or we use it for, this is my account executive who takes all my notes and then helps them provide those summaries. The one thing that comes with all of them though is there's always gotta be a human in the loop. And that's the way it should always be, is that there's always that human that's always using for verification or for just double checking to make sure that everything is there, but you're still checking someone's work as opposed to creating it all from scratch, which for me is a lifesaver.
Yeah.
If you wanna know more about ours, you can talk to
Person
Scott
right
afterwards.
back at you is the one that was.
Yeah, I was gonna say what I see in the industrial strength applications is build and buy. Because the large language models, they're large and they're general purpose and you don't need that. Like if you're just taking call center notes and you wanna categorize them into one of 5 categories, you don't need a large model to do that. But what they do is they take something like ChatGPT and they train a set and use it as, they use it to create training data, and then they use that labeled data to train a small model, and it performs just as well as the large model. So it's kind of like buy and build.
It reminds me of something I was just reading this morning is Bayer, the agriculture and aspirin company, announced that they are gonna be doing industry-specific small language models.
Yeah.
Exactly along the lines of what you're talking about.
Well, that's where RAG comes into play, of retrieval augmented generation, and the R, and there's a lot of people who think it's vector. R means retrieval, not not vector. And that means that in that description of how am I going to get that information access? And that is then where you can use the larger models to help basically ferret down into those requests and help put that so that then you can then use your corpus as you want to. That's been a really effective, and sometimes you might have 2 RAGs, one that gives the answer and then the other one that then checks the answer. We've been able to kind of see that because QA kind of makes the world go round right now with some of those.
Yeah, the products that we're working on, we use RAG as well. And, you know, there's an information flow that happens and a data flow, and it does hit these different models to do those checks and balances. But this whole area is, I've heard it described as verticalized AI, right? So which vertical are we even talking about? And doing a small model for a vertical, and then there's businesses out there. I don't know the name of it. I'm not sure if anyone knows the name, but this guy, he's like 29 or 30 or something like that, and he owns this massive business of people who just record their knowledge. They're people who are in, they've got a career's worth of knowledge, and this is primary information and primary data, and it's just being captured by this guy. And because he knows that this is where the value is going to be, because we're going to run out of information on the internet or whatever these models are getting their information from. And so this guy's building this company, and it's worth billions of dollars today, and I can't think of the name of it.
Ryan Romley?
Is that the Wisdom Project?
I'll find out.
There
but
is
it's-
another,
yeah.
there is another futurist who is doing that called the Wisdom Project, because he's trying to capture all the knowledge. As we know,
Yeah.
archive.org
Exactly.
had a big hiccup, and we lost a ton. We lost a third, I think, part of the internet from 2013 and before. So that's a lot of knowledge. So he has actually started a project where he's trying to capture that as well, of how, so we don't lose that, and he's calling it Become the Amnesia Generation, where we end up learning everything all over again, because that old knowledge that we take for granted and is already in our brains that we forget about, that is not lost. But yeah.
So, yeah, I'll take one more question and then we can mingle outside. You go first.
Okay. Got a question about ethical boundaries personally in terms of use of AI. Two sort of anecdotes. The one is a colleague of mine discovered that she could do something in 20 minutes that previously took her 12 hours. And she's wondering whether she should tell her manager and other folks. The second one is we have devices now that can record everything you see and do during the day. And then you can interrogate it with ChatGPT at the end of the day to sort of. So I'm wondering what your ethical boundaries were and are now as you're using AI, and any sort of recommendations, particularly for students who may be using these as tools to make their life more efficient, which may not be the
I'm
perspective.
teaching them how to do that.
Which may not be the perspective of their professors and.
I've
Should we
got lots to
start
say, but
loaded,
you can
or,
start.
yeah?
Go
I
ahead.
mean, it's just, it's really about foundational transparency and honesty. So, if I'm telling my boss that it takes me 12 hours to do this, and it always has, and I found a way to do it in 20, and then I'm just kind of watching Netflix for the other 11 hours and 40 minutes, get paid for it, that's an ethical issue for me. It's a moral issue for me. It's probably an ethical issue for the organization. Yeah, I think you have
Definitely have to
responsibility
say,
if
yeah.
you're getting paid, to kind of honestly reflect what it is you're working on.
She's a busy person. She's not doing Netflix for the rest of the day.
No, I know, but she's doing
I
something
think
else,
that's
right?
the productivity. You hear companies that talk about cutting employees, and I don't think you think about it that way. I think it's more about what can we finally get to that we never got to before. I think that's the better way to approach it.
So I gave you an example of how I trim down something from what would take me a day to like 9 minutes, I think. And I'm not sure if it would take a day to do that, but you get the idea. And I heard an analogy recently, and someone said, if your CEO hired an assistant to help them, would that person be cheating? So, and the answer, of course, is no, right? So, but then on to the next part of the question, which is, what about the balance of that time? And personally, I've not found any time available to me that I can use as a leisure time because of that thing that I just did, Something filled that space super fast. And I don't know how, in what order of time and how much time it will take for us to actually be able to control how we can, be more efficient, like I was saying when I was talking, and then apply it somewhere else in a way that I'm actually aware of and can talk about. Now, when I created that GPT, And we just had a little bit of a reorganization in our product marketing. We've got lots of products at ReadyLink, it's a dozen or so. And so we restructured the PMMs, and I now have a new product. And I don't know it very well at all. It's one of our top selling products, and we've got 1,000 customers who use it. And I'm new to it. And I fed a lot of information and to build this GPT. And again, this is all behind, using Microsoft tools. And then there's the Gong Call one. So I created 2 this week. And I quickly shared that with people. And I said, look at this. And by the way, I'm one of the few people who have the paid version. And everyone's like, when can we get that? Mm-hmm. And they can get it sometime after January 1st when new budgets roll around. And so I'm like, this is what's on the other side of January 1st or whatever. And so I'm just like saying, look at all these things, and then let's figure out how to work with it.
I think you just gave the answer to his question. It's not an ethical question at all. It's an opportunity cost, because what you did when you share that information and help the whole organization, your value goes up exponentially.
Right.
Whereas if you're off watching Netflix, you've squandered that.
And not only that, as I'll say one more thing, is the comparison of an organization of everyone kind of squirreling around doing things by themselves and then not sharing it, as opposed to everyone saying, we're gonna use this stuff and we're gonna share it and it's gonna be awesome and we're gonna be great as a company. 2 different things.
Yeah. I want to share one example I just thought of while you were triggered by something you said. And it is about efficiency. I had a physical 2 weeks ago with Northwestern. I walked in, they asked me to sign a waiver because they're doing an AI pilot. And they wanted to record the conversation I was having with my doctor.
I had the same last week.
They used an AI system to write up the notes for that. And my doctor knows that I'm in AI. And we had a brief conversation about it. He said, I can see 2.5 times more patients now because I'm not writing up notes if this pilot is successful.
The scary thing is it hallucinates in the transcription and they delete the original recordings. So there have been a lot of situations where the transcript has sexist or racist or incorrect statements because the training data is coming from YouTube. And that's now in your written record.
Okay,
So that can be a little bit scary.
yes.
My doctor showed me the output actually, and it's still in pilot so that, because I asked him, I'm like, I teach this stuff, I wanna see what you're doing with it. And he's like, see, and then he goes, well, this, I don't need this part in there. And then he erases it because they're still figuring it out, but it still saved him a lot of time.
It also depends.
It didn't transcribe the conversation. It boiled down the notes.
The essence. Yeah, right, exactly.
As opposed to dragon, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the reality, as a consultant, looking at it a different side of, corporate sides of how our value prop is different. We're, one of the big things that Sam Altman said, what was it, anything an AI will be able to do, we won't need an
95%,
agency,
Yeah.
Tell me you don't know marketing
The
without
quote.
telling me you don't know marketing, and I'm just gonna throw that out there. But the reality of it is that we're going to look at, do we measure our value and our output in terms of thingies and hours? Or are we looking at what impact we're making? As an entrepreneur, as a founder, it's, what are your big 3 things to do today versus that 16 item list that I have that then I feel a crushing failure when I've only gotten through 7. That is where we start to reimagine how our work is. At first it was, AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI will. No, it's actually, AI is going to transform your job. AI is going to be able to help us understand when used properly, when implemented, big asterisks, when done well. Because we all know that it's the reality of it is it's the value of what we are being able to put and then freeing us up to do those things that can't be done by AI or that can't be done by technology yet. There's plenty of other things that come out there that I think are coming there. But the question is like, it's just like which is what's led me down the rabbit hole of copyright. What content is valuable? What work is valuable? What are those things that make them valuable? Those are the big, crap, now I'm questioning what I'm doing for a living. I kid. Of where you're thinking about these things, of using these tools for that. We do share with our clients when we do use them. I actually just recently had an experience with an agency I was working with where their clients had absolutely no AI. And I said, okay, you realize that means we can't use spell check. What? Yeah, let's talk about when you say no AI, and that's that fear of, it's the big things, right? There are smaller things we can do to get the comfort level and to feel safe. And that sounds really simplified, but when you're trying to set these governance rules that are more like, I always feel like, I'm in Pirates of the Caribbean, they're more like guidelines. The pirate rules.
Yeah.
It's thinking through those sides of it of what's the value of what it is you're going to get, what's the risk, and then covering off on that, especially when we are living in a day and age where I feel like every time I turn around, I'm finding out that another team's been cut. And so they either need a consultant or I just have to do more with less. So I think that's where we figure that value, but there is some transparency. There's lots of arguments I've heard of, do you say you use spell check or did you say you did that on your documents? But I think that's also that definition of where does it become wholly human created and then edited as opposed to completely generated from above, then yeah, that's a whole other thing. And there are some government rulings on whether or not that can be copyrighted. Unfortunately, those are based on rules from like 1800 and the invention of the camera.
Right.
So that's why it's, again, watch the space.
I got one more thing to say. You remember sorry, is that okay, Jackie? One more
You're
thing?
just holding everyone from their
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, just one more.
I have this kind of attention span, I'm
Yeah,
like,
so,
let's go.
remember I was telling you about the two GPTs I created. The first one was for the product, the other one was the gong calls. And it just occurred to me that, I should tell you kind of how that process went. Because the first one was so miraculous and it just kind of went through and it created, because I was just using a bunch of product information. So then I said, I created this whole 8,000 character prompt for these gong calls. And it immediately said, nope, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, what's going on? I have no idea what's going on here. And so I asked, I said, what's the problem? And so it said some things and I looked it up. And it turns out that it was because I could have picked up on personal information or personal discussions and things like that. So about 10 prompts later, going into this thing, it was all about anonymizing in the prompt. So you had to anonymize and aggregate all of the information.
Yeah.
So since this discussion has shifted way over to the ethics part, I thought I would throw that in there as well because it was relevant.
Oh, yeah.
We can answer more out there.
Yeah, we can answer more questions out there. I also want to say, if we have your email address, both Matt and my slides will be released and sent to you if you want them. I've also got some resource slides in there as well. But thank you, everyone.
So we plan on doing this regularly and really for education, discussion, no sales pitches. It's just to get everybody educated, learn from each other.
And meet each other too.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I know, that's why I was like,